welcome to Big Muddy Mayhem, the podcast where we talk about true crime and bad behavior in the Midwest.
Each week we'll bring you 2 stories from the heartland that might break your heart, but we hope to entertain you along the way.
I'm Tracey Laricha.
And I'm Janet O'Brien.
All right. Well, howdy, Janet.
Hi, Tracey. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We've been sitting here catching up for a bit.
Yes.
Hope that everybody had a wonderful New Year's.
Absolutely. I hope so, too.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is our second episode to drop in 2024.
However, this is our first podcast where we're actually recording in 2024.
Our last podcast is why you should not record on Benadryl. So I'm over the bug that I had last week.
That's good.
And happy to be here and getting muddy with you in the new year.
Of course, yeah.
All right.
I'm so excited.
I am too. So, I believe it is my turn to go first.
Yes,
this week.
it is.
And I have a story that there is a possibility that you've heard this one, but even if you have, I think that there are some new details that that I've come out with in doing the research, and it's certainly a fun one.
Awesome. I love fun stories.
Something a little lighter. I am here to tell you today a story that stems kind of throughout the Midwest, although it begins on the East Coast.
Okay.
And that is that I am going to tell you about Elmer McCurdy.
I have not heard that name.
Okay. Elmer McCurdy, I'm sorry, I said East Coast. He's born in Maine in 1880.
Okay.
His mother is unmarried. They don't really have any idea about his dad, but they're pretty sure that it was probably his mom's cousin.
Oh.
Now, she is an unwed mother, so Elmer is put up for adoption and adopted by his uncle and aunt, even though Mama stays in the picture. Mm-hmm. So, his uncle dies when he's a teenager.
Oh, no.
And the aunt and the mother come clean, and they're like, hey, not really your mom, I'm your aunt.
Oh,
this isn't really your aunt, it's your mom.
At least they kept it in the family, you know?
This is something really common, I think, like kind of for a long, long time.
Absolutely.
You know, and so he doesn't take it well. He starts kind of drinking and he's getting into trouble, like, you know, kind of petty crimes and all of that. His grandfather takes him aside for a little while and trains him to be a plumber.
Oh.
And so he's actually pretty talented at that, so that kind of puts him in line for a while.
Okay.
And then almost immediately thereafter, we have several family deaths, like all one right after the other. His grandfather.
I'm just thinking of something, I'm sorry.
What's that? Okay.
So, the plumber thing, I'm a huge Community fan. There's a person in Community, the show, where Troy is definitely a plumber. Oh. Like, he just naturally knows how to fix things all the time.
Oh, sure.
So,
yeah,
sorry, that's
okay.
Just a weird thing that came up. Go ahead.
So, yeah, like, his grandfather is trying to teach him a trade, so he learns plumbing. Everything is going all right, and then he has several family members that die within a very short amount of time. His mother and his grandfather are among them.
Oh, no.
So he's kind of on his own now.
Oh, man.
He goes east. He becomes proficient in alcoholism.
Proficient.
He tries his hand at mining.
Okay.
He's not as good at mining, but he does end up with a nice case of TB for his efforts.
Oh, good.
So he decides he's going to go back west again.
Okay.
He goes back to Kansas. He goes back to plumbing, but by this point, his, substance issues and his personality kind of mean that he is, bad on bad on bad. Like, he's having a hard time staying in a position anywhere.
Oh.
So, your luck's gone bad and then it's gone worse. Why not move to Missouri?
You mean misery?
Right. So he moves to Webb City, Missouri in 1907, and this is where he joins the Army. Mm-hmm. And so he starts out at Fort Leavenworth.
Okay.
And he works on mostly, I think, civil projects, it looks like. Roads, rails, all of that kind of,
Sure.
like, let's
absolutely.
get the, like the roads or the routes for places, people to get places. And he's trained to use machine guns. He is also trained to use nitroglycerin because they're blowing up mountains and things in order to be able to make way for the roadways. And so here is the earliest kind of picture.
Okay, yeah, it's an old picture. It looks very pixelated, but he just looks like a normal guy. Yeah,
right.
Like nothing interesting.
So this is Elmer.
Okay.
And remember him how you see him now.
Yes, I will.
Okay. 1910, he receives honorable discharge from the Army. He moves to St. Joseph, Kansas.
Okay.
So shortly thereafter, in St. Joseph, he and a buddy are arrested for having a whole bunch of sketchy stuff.
Oh, what kind of sketchy stuff?
Well, I'm glad you asked. They have burglary tools, hacksaws, funnels that one would use with nitroglycerin, gunpowder,
okay,
and most interesting, a bunch of money sacks, like the kinds of burlap sacks that you would use to carry cash back in those days. It's 1910, Right. He says there's nothing dirty going on. It's that they have this because he is researching to build a foot-powered machine gun.
Okay.
We don't have time to get into that. But the long story short, he's released. Charges are dropped.
Okay.
So by now, though, Elmer has clearly kind of gone to the bad.
Sure.
So we start out with plan number 1.
There's a plan number 1. How many plans are there?
Oh, just you wait. Plan number 1. It's March of 1911. Elmer, a man named Albert Connor, and 2 brothers, Walter and Lee Jarrett.
Okay.
They are all kind of in on a plan together. Elmer met Walter 2 weeks prior while they were both in jail.
Oh, this is going to go over great.
This is going so
This is
well.
going to go perfect.
I mean, I'm sorry, my story is going to be like 4 minutes long. They all got rich and lived happily ever after. The end. So they're going to rob an Iron Mountain Pacific train.
Okay.
With roughly 200 passengers aboard.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Elmer is the explosive specialist because he's been trained in the use of nitroglycerin. Mm-hmm. So he can totally do this part of the heist.
Of course.
Well...
What happened, Tracy?
He tries 4 times to blow up the safe on the train.
On the train?
The first 3 times he tries with nitroglycerin. The last one he uses dynamite.
Yes, as you do.
Meanwhile, his associates are holding off all of the passengers with guns.
Of course they are.
By the time you blow something up 4 times, you've attracted the attention of the other people on the train.
What? You're crazy.
So, Elmer messes the bed and blows up the entire safe. It was supposed to have $4,000 worth of silver in it, but in the blast, most of the silver melts, sprays out all over, goes everywhere.
Shoot, no.
And then as it cools, solidifies to the safe itself. So there is no clean getaway. He's chipping at the silver with an axe, but this is an epic mess. Like, this
of course
is a huge, huge mess. So what they end up leaving with is many melted coins
Yes.
totaling about $400.
Oh, no.
So 10% of what they think they're going to get.
Yeah.
And it's split 4 ways.
Oh.
They escape.
Okay.
But the accomplices by this point are just done with Elmer.
Mm-hmm.
It was his bright idea in the first place, right? Elmer takes off. He uses several aliases. He's still just kind of a petty criminal who's just bad at this job.
Right.
He's so bad that he earns in a local paper the nickname Elmer McCurdy, the bandit who wouldn't give up. Like, he's a try too hard.
Try too hard?
But he's really good at finding new people and getting them on board.
Mm-hmm.
September 1911.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all right, so from March, now we're in September.
Sure.
Plan number 2.
Plan number 2!
So he involves 2 different people, Higgins and Amos. They're in Kansas, 2 new accomplices, and this time they're doing something a little different. They're going to rob a bank.
Okay. Rob a bank.
So I know we're flying through the details, but
cool.
believe me when I say we have a long way to go. So they start out at this bank in Kansas in the dark of night. 2 hours of chiseling away at the outer wall of the bank. They get into the building. Get access to the building.
Okay.
Elmer puts a really long fuse in. He is not going to make the same mistake again, except for the part where he makes the same mistake again. He uses way more explosives than he employed on the train. He is very, very poor at judging how much nitroglycerin to use. So, 3, 2, 1, boom! The safe door is blown off.
Okay.
A majority of the bank building is, if not destroyed outright, then ruptured beyond repair. Everything in the bank building, the silverware, all of this is kind of gone to ruin. You know what's still okay, Janet?
What's okay?
The interior door to the safe. They can't do anything about this. Their lookout gets nervous and takes off. People are waking up. They are coming. This is a small town. They make off with just a tray of coins that was sitting on top of the safe and hadn't been deposited.
They're not good at this job. Why do they keep trying?
I don't know.
I know you have to keep trying to get better at a job, but...
And how is this your top man every single time? Different accomplices, but man.
Right.
This guy must have been such a smooth talker. Anyway, they end up with now about $150 in all. So almost half of what they got the first time that was also a failure.
Oh my God.
Split 3 ways. So they get $50 apiece.
Oh boy.
Higgins, one of the accomplices, he pieces out right then and there.
Yeah.
But Amos is leaning in. You're my guy, Elmer. We're going to do this. We're going to get there, the 2 of us.
Okay.
So after only weeks.
Is there a plan number 3?
They're back on their train bullshit.
Of course they are. Oh, okay. We're back to the train. Okay.
We're back to the train. So, and this is where I will show you my second story, or second picture rather. Amos and Elmer plan to rob the Katy train, or a Katy train. Mm-hmm. Now, KT trains got their name from being the Kansas, Texas, Missouri line.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Where we probably get the Katy Depot because it went along the Missouri and the Mississippi.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So you can see this is where the Katy Railroad.
Yeah, it goes through Oklahoma and Missouri and Kansas and Texas and just kind of touches Louisiana.
And all of our photos, again, will be available for you in the show notes. Amos and Elmer plan to rob the Katy train. This train is carrying $400,000.
They gotta go. They gotta go.
They're going big because this train is carrying $400,000 in royalty payments that are intended by the government to be paid to the Osage Nation.
Oh, okay.
So, it's Elmer. Still Elmer. So, wrong train.
Oh, no. No!
They get on the completely wrong train.
Of course they do.
There are no passengers.
Oh my God.
There's no money. Elmer and Amos still do their best job at a stick-up and make off with what they can, which is not much. $46. Some bottles of whiskey.
They probably needed the whiskey. After the third try.
A handgun and a wristwatch that belonged to the conductor.
Oh my God.
Also, there was some beer, but they drank that while they were on the train.
Again, they're not really good at their job.
Who not very good at this?
I mean, it's not a job, but it is a job. It's not a good job.
Third time is not the charm for them.
No.
So, this apparently, according to one newspaper of the time, may have been the smallest recorded train heist in history. Now, one thing that Elmer has always historically been good at, though, is getting away.
Of course. Well, yeah. Well,
So-
he barely stole anything.
Right. Sorry, you lost your watch.
I'm not going after that guy.
So he goes off with like what they've managed to nab, and goes to drink about it in a friend's barn. Now, meanwhile, it's there is a price on his head at this point because it's been a couple of times.
Sure.
So a posse is formed. Like,
A posse?
Muddy Buddies drink every time that Tracey says a posse is formed on this podcast. But then don't drive. Not even a train, not even a mule. Anyway, posse is formed, and they very shortly thereafter find him literally with the effort of two things. They had bloodhounds.
Oh, okay.
And they found like a literal actual trail of whiskey bottles along the road as Elmer made his way through his ill-gotten gains.
Oh my God.
So, dogs and whiskey, it'll get you every time. Laid out like breadcrumbs. So the story says that he challenges the police.
Okay.
Evidence says that he was probably shot while half passed out in the hayloft of his friend's barn.
Oh, wow.
So Elmer is dead.
Aw.
And now I'm going to start our story.
What? I'm sorry. I thought that was the story. No.
Settle up, take a pause, hit the bathroom, get a sandwich, come back. We're getting into this. 1911. Elmer's remains are sent to the Johnson Funeral Home. Mm-hmm. He's embalmed with arsenic. This is customary for bodies where they don't have any nearby family and they have to have more time for the families to like find, identify, and claim them.
Okay.
The Johnsons display Elmer as a notable criminal, even though he was a terrible criminal.
He was a terrible criminal.
They charge money to come see him, like as long as he's there.
Well, yeah, that was a thing.
Right.
They were charged for stuff like that.
There was no cable.
I mean, they did that with, like, Jesse James' mother did that with the house that he was killed in. I mean, she literally had people go through the house.
Where the bullet holes in the wall and all of that, right.
So crazy. Mm-hmm.
They weren't as lucky as all of you spoiled brats that get to listen to Big Muddy Mayhem. You had to entertain yourselves. So people are charged money to see him, which is deposited into Elmer's mouth. He is in a casket, at first laying down, and then they discover that they can put him upright in the casket. There are even stories about how they were able to affix roller skates to the bottom of it so they could move it from room to room.
Now this just sounds like a New Orleans funeral. Let's just go there.
It does. So they put the money into his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
He says, well, I'm just doing this so I can preserve him until his relatives come and get him. Thousands of people go to see Elmer.
Of course they do.
Lots of people offer to, like, can I buy that off of you? But of course, you know, the Johnsons are in this for the right reasons, so they won't. They're like, oh, of course we wouldn't sell him, not unless we find his family. They're not going to let go of their golden goose, right?
No, not at all.
Well, finally, Elmer's brothers, they show up and they claim the body.
Okay.
And here is a picture of Elmer in the casket at the Johnson home.
Yeah.
Do you want to give a description?
So it just looks like one of those wooden caskets. It kind of reminds me of like a Civil War thing, right, where they just have the body laying in it, and he meaning he's dead, but he looks like he's just laying there. I mean, he's got suspenders and the high-waisted pants and the button-up shirt, and he is definitely not clean and definitely not shaven.
But still pretty well preserved.
Very
for
well
the day.
preserved. Very well preserved.
So
probably better than Abraham.
I was gonna say, so yeah, his brothers completely, yes.
Yeah.
His brothers show up to collect the body and like take him home for burial.
Mm-hmm.
Just kidding, he didn't have any brothers.
What happened next?
Well, the brothers that picked him up were actually brothers. They were Charles and James Patterson.
But they weren't his brothers.
They weren't his brothers. They happened to run a carnival.
I'm sorry, Dad.
Shout out to Papa Janet. They run a carnival. And soon Elmer is on display in West Texas.
Oh, yeah. This is during the time when you would display bodies.
Right.
Of course.
So he ends
fun.
up, like at the West Texas Carnival, and then on the
God.
road in traveling shows. Again, billed as either the Oklahoma outlaw or the bandit who wouldn't give up. While on the road, though, the Patterson show goes broke.
Aww.
And he's repossessed. There is no funeral possession. Call back. So he's repossessed as collateral.
Oh my God. Well, we have to repossess that body. I'm sorry.
That's right. 1922.
Okay, how long has he been dead now?
He was killed in, I believe, 1911.
So he's still preserved.
Uh-huh.
And he's a carnival. It's like been over 10 years at this point.
Yes, ma'am.
Holy crap.
1922.
Oh my God.
The Wax Museum of Crime. A man named Louis Sony. Mm-hmm. Not Sony like the entertainment center, please don't sue us. But Sonney. Mm-hmm. Sony. He acquires the remains as part of a sideshow he buys, like part of this failing carnival. And then runs them around also as part of his own sideshow. And in 1933, he opens up an actual wax museum.
33. We're in 33.
In sunny Los Angeles. Oh. So this is the slowest trip out west ever made by a cowboy.
By anyone.
1933, Elmer, having just reached Los Angeles, eat your heart out actors. He makes it in the movies.
What? He does?
He does.
Oh my God.
Just briefly, he is shown as a prop in an anti-drug film.
Oh my God.
This is 1933, so this is right around like Reefer Madness.
Yes, absolutely.
He's shown as an example of what can happen to you if you become a dope fiend.
Hence, but he died like 20 years before. But it's fine.
Stay in school, kids.
Oh my God.
So, all good things come to an end, and finally, unfortunately, the Wax Museum of Crime is closed. Lewis's son, Dan, now has the inventory, including Elmer, who is now inventory.
Of course he is.
And by now, nobody knows who he is or that this is an actual real
person.
cadaver.
Wow. So arsenic, that's what
made the preservation last so long.
Wow.
Okay. We've still got a little ways to go. Gonna skip ahead a little bit. 1964.
What?
Dan Sonny and his partner, they get more into making film. So they decide to sell off all the wax figures, taxidermy, everything from the museum, all the quote-unquote inventory, gets sold out to 3 guys that are from Canada, most notably a man named Spoonie Singh. And by 1968, Elmer is now part of the Hollywood Wax Museum.
Are you freaking kidding me?
I am
not. Wow.
Madam, I will cite sources.
Oh my God.
So the Hollywood Wax Museum in 1968, he is part of the inventory again. They don't know anything about him. They don't know who he is or what, that he is in fact a person. But they think that it's just kind of shoddy waxwork.
It is not.
So they dub him the 1,000-year-old man.
Okay.
They build a case for him to go in, and they drill a couple of holes in him. He leaks apparently yellow goo, but nobody is suspicious of this. And they add essentially what is close to... Do you remember from when we were very young and like more of our parents' days where you could go to a hotel and they would have the magic fingers where you could like put a coin in?
Yes. And it would make your bed vibrate.
And it would make your bed shake?
Yes.
Well, they fit him up with like kind of something like that so that he will like light up and convulse.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
And they put him at the entrance of the attraction.
Oh my God! You know what? I mean, I know I'm laughing at a dead person, but I wouldn't be upset if this happened to me.
You know, I have said for as long as I've been an adult that whenever, like, it's my turn to go, I just want it to be in a way that makes someone say, "She what?" And this is certainly, and we're not even done yet.
Oh, Jesus.
So, the Hollywood Wax Museum closes. Elmer, as part of the assets of another failed business, is repoed again. He's stored in a closet in an electrician's office for a while, and then he eventually becomes part of the city of Long Beach, California, for the Pike Amusement Park in Long Beach.
Okay.
Thinking that this is a mannequin, he ends up being hanged by his neck and painted in day glow paint because we're like almost to the 70s here.
Oh yeah.
Like,
you gotta have something.
so he's painted in day glow paint that will look good under black light and hangs by his neck as a prop for a laugh in the dark fun ride. Now, laugh, and I want to just point out, because this is important, that it's spelled L-A-F-F. The laugh in the dark is kind of like one of those dark rides that were basically just used for hand jobs and smooching. You know, yes. Tunnel of love.
Exactly. If you're from Missouri, you know
the
Tunnel of Love
tunnel.
is the time tunnel.
You've probably known it by several names. So he, quote unquote, lives there as a prop for the laugh in the dark for 4 years.
Okay.
Now it's going to get weird.
Because it hasn't gotten weird yet. So this hasn't gotten weird yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Hang on.
I'm waiting.
Hold on, like we're on the Laugh in the Dark thrill
Okay,
ride.
I'm ready.
All right, so now there is a TV show that is filming. It's the $6 Million Man. And they're filming at this particular amusement park.
Now I have to look up the episode, but go ahead.
A member goes to kind of like, they're checking the set, like all of that. They've got the ride blocked off. They're going to be filming that day. A crew member is like, this mannequin isn't really like our aesthetic. We're going to...
Mannequin.
They go to pull the mannequin down. His arm breaks. And inside are real bones.
Of course. So, because he's not a mannequin.
Right. So, and this is the part that I think is kind of funny. They call the police and they call the paramedics, and whatever freaking joker called this in reports it as a case of, quote, extreme dehydration. There was no, we can rebuild him. We haven't, right, which you would think.
You can only rebuild Lee Majors.
So anyway, they do come and collect the body. They're like, oh yeah, that's a body. They deliver him to the coroner of Los Angeles County, who's kind of a famous coroner.
Oh, nice.
His name was Dr. Stephen Choi.
Okay.
He assisted also with the autopsies of Jim Morrison, Marilyn Monroe. So like about this time of year, like he's kind of top of his game.
Sure.
Again, he's like, yep, that's a body. Yep, he died of a gunshot. But who is he?
Who is it? Nobody knows at this point.
Well, Dr. Choi finds some clues in Elmer's mouth.
Okay.
Janet?
Tracey.
Remember how I told you about how they used to put the coins in his mouth back in the 1920s?
Right. He has the coin in his mouth still.
They find coins in his mouth that date back to the 20s, along with ticket stubs from the Wax Museum.
Oh my God!
So, 66 years.
66 years after he died.
After he dies, we know the score. By this time, Elmer is about 5'3". He weighs about 60 pounds. And we finally have an identity. Wow. No surviving relatives or anything as far as, like, anyone can tell. But we know who he is and that he is, in fact, a person.
Wow.
Every mortuary in town, remember this is LA, right? Is like, oh, we'll take him, we'll bury him, you can put him here, you know.
Right.
They're not quite sure what to do, but after some discussion, he is eventually claimed by the members of the Oklahoma Historical Society and also members of the Osage Nation.
Oh, of course.
And so they take him back to Oklahoma where he died. And he's buried in Guthrie, Oklahoma at Summit View Cemetery. You can still, to this day, if you care to, go and see the grave of Elmer McCurdy.
Okay. There it is.
And
it's
I'm showing you a picture.
Yeah, it says, shot by Sheriff's Posse in Osage Hills on October 7th, 1911, returned to Guthrie, Oklahoma from Los Angeles County, California for burial in April 22nd of 1977.
Wow.
Wow.
We were alive then.
I was alive then, for sure.
Now, just in case you're worried, Elmer's remains were buried under a 2-foot slab of concrete. Just in case.
Just in case!
And that is the wild story of very bad outlaw, but still like the most famous person to ever be known for a job that they consistently fucked up at. Elmer McCurdy, ladies and gentlemen.
That was a fantastic story, and I lost my mind. I'm sorry. I know I normally laugh during podcasts, but that was funny.
It is very, very funny. I will cite you briefly my sources, which were, there is a a podcast which doesn't seem to be recording anymore, but which I really liked, called the Drift and Ramble podcast.
Okay.
That talks about the Old West and a little bit more about like Elmer's adventures at West. Of course, the ever-present Wikipedia.
Of course.
NPR.org, who also had a pretty good story. And then I also had sources from Atlas Obscura. Atlas Obscura. Let me say it 3 times. I'll get it right.
Exactly.
All
That was
right.
fantastic.
Thank you. Well, I was worried that you might know.
I mean, I might have heard about it, but I don't remember his name. It sounds kind of familiar. It's been a bit.
But
So,
there's more there than I ever knew was there.
absolutely, absolutely. So, as this podcast tends to have a problem. Well, it's not a problem. It's a good problem. Tracey and I tend to like run on the same fumes, or we just find kind of similar
Adjacent stories?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so
We're on the same podcast cycle.
absolutely. So she had like probably the world's worst bank robber, trank robbery.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about the largest train robbery in U.S. history. Done in Rondout, Illinois in 1924.
Okay.
They had better people who used nitroglycerin. I'm just going to say
Better
that right
than
now.
Elmer.
A little bit better. So I'm just going to give you a hint of what happened, and then I'm going to kind of go into it.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the Newton Gang? There was a movie that came out in the late 90s called The Newton Boys.
Juice Newton and the Newton Boys?
No, it's just the
teasing.
Newton Boys. So in June 12th of 1924 at 10:30 p.m., a train was robbed. It happened in Roundout in between Lake Forest and Libertyville in Illinois.
Okay.
The gunmen took over $3 million.
No way.
So I went on the opposite spectrum.
So they're already way, way better at this.
correct.
If they get away, they've already won.
Exactly. So the Newton Gang, they were an outlaw gang that happened. They were around in the 1920s. They mostly robbed banks and trains. Between 1919 and 1924, one of the Newton boys said they robbed 87 banks, but that's unconfirmed. 6 trains, that's definitely confirmed.
Okay.
According to one of the members, Willis Newton, he's the gang leader, he said they took in more money than Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch, the Dalton Gang, and James Younger's gang combined.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
quite
I'm
a bit.
literally on the other side of your story.
Right. Yeah, no, these guys are top of the pops.
Right. And they claim they never killed anyone.
Okay.
So
How?
we'll get there. 1975, they participated in a documentary and an oral history, which ended up turning into a book. And then there was a movie put out.
Okay.
They basically left the most clear record of a criminal career because they talked about it.
Right. They weren't, at that stage of the game, I guess, like, you're not even shy. You're like, yeah, we did that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the history of them, there was 4 sons. They were a part of a large cotton farming family in Uvalde. Is that how you say it? Uvalde. County in Texas. They were raised on outlaw stories by their mother and their brother Willis Newton, who was later the leader of the gang.
Okay.
Willis followed the. He was basically a paper boy, a newsboy, and so he would read the newspapers all the time. And he was following this guy by the name of Harry Tracey. And
What'd you call me?
you're not Harry. And then in 1902, apparently Harry Tracey committed suicide, and he got really upset about it. He was because they, it's like during that time, you would hear about these outlaws, but they had kind of fun stories.
It was the dime store novel kind of, like these were your heroes. These were your these were your X-Men.
Exactly.
These were your superheroes.
Right, absolutely. Willis quit school after going to school for a whole year.
Oh. Well, that's probably plenty.
Yeah, it's fine. So at the age of 20, Willis was convicted of a crime that he said he didn't commit. He said that his brother, Doc Newton, he stole loose cotton from a loading dock that was processing cotton. And so it was a processing gen, and then he went to go try to sell it to another processing gen.
Oh, okay. So he's just taking raw materials.
Yeah.
Right.
So the authorities couldn't find his brother Doc, so they arrested Willis instead.
Does he have a brother, Doc?
He does.
Okay, good.
So the local jury convicted Willis, and he was sentenced to 1 year in the Texas state prison system, which apparently was a horrible system at this time.
Or at any time.
I know, right?
But, yeah.
There was inhumane conditions, and he was in this terrible, jail. He got really hardened. He was like, oh yeah, injustice, and this is a terrible jail. Screw these people. So anyway, Doc, he ended up joining him as a prisoner.
Okay.
So he definitely has a brother by the name of Doc.
Okay, good, because they're both there. We know where they are now.
Yeah, so Doc ended up going into prison because he robbed a post office. And they believe it was for stamps because the record says it was stated that he only stole less than $50.
They are going up. I mean,
so from 1909 to 1920, the two brothers were in and out of the Texas prison system due to the many escape attempts. They kept trying to escape from prison.
Right.
And then they would get put back in prison and have to serve more time because they were trying to escape.
They were caught trying to escape.
So I don't really understand how people back in the day would escape all the time, but I guess there was just a lot of people in the system already who probably worked there. It was like, well, if you give me enough money, you can go.
Right, completely. You can kind of either buy your way out, or also I bet that there is a whole lot of if it comes down to your life or my life, this is above my pay grade. I didn't see a thing.
Here's the funny part. Once Willis was released, he began his career as doing petty theft. He would basically break into general stores and steal clothing at night.
Okay.
Now, they had two other brothers by the name of Jess and Joe Newton. They stayed out of the jail because they were bronc busters and ranch hands.
Okay, so they had a different kind of marketable skill that they could use rather than just, yeah.
So in 1914, Willis, who ends up being the head guy, and an accomplice robbed the Southern Pacific Railroad passenger train. They stole $4,700 from passengers.
Okay. Which is why you need to rob a train with people on board.
What?
Otherwise, you just end up with $42 and a couple of bottles of rot gut that will get you shot.
Exactly. In 1916, Willis robbed a bank from Boswell, Oklahoma, with a gang that he joined. So he joined a gang, and they stole $10,000, and they escaped on horseback.
Oh,
Isn't that
okay.
crazy?
Mm-hmm.
1917, he went back to prison for that robbery. And then, Willis, what does he do? He forges letters to get himself a pardon.
Okay.
How do you do that?
Forgery seems like it also used to be a lot easier than it is nowadays.
Absolutely. So at this point in time, because he's watching this old gang that he's in, and it's they had a lot of people kind of coming and going because people would get killed or they just made stupid mistakes. He's like, you know what? I'm starting my own gang.
Oh, okay.
So he decides to create his own gang, and he decided to create his own gang, and he met up with partners to create the gang. In 1920, operating out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, he formed what is now called the Newton Boys.
Okay.
So that's the name of the movie. Along with Brent Glasscock, who was...
I'm sorry.
I know! I do that all the time when I've reread this, and you have no idea.
Pardon me a moment. I have to retire.
Tracey is checking on her dog who's trying to escape.
I know. I'm going to leave her where she is.
She's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so as opposed to your story, Tracey, Brent Glasscock was a safecracker, and an expert in explosives.
Yeah, he was.
So he was good at it. He eventually convinced Joe and Jess, the two people living in Uvalde, the two other brothers who were not criminals, to join. So, and then in 1920, conveniently, Doc escaped from prison and also joined.
Oh, okay.
So we got all the four brothers together.
So he's Glasscock Newton now, right? Oh, no. Hold on.
That's the extra guy that's not a brother.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, he can break into
Could
the
he
safes.
not be an honorary Newton?
He knew how to use nitroglycerin.
Uh-huh.
So they ended up basically robbing banks in Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Colorado, North Dakota, Missouri, Wisconsin, and Canada.
So the entire Midwest.
And also possibly, but not confirmed, Oregon and Washington State.
Okay.
How they robbed the banks.
Go on. I would like to know.
So basically, what they would do is they would rob them at night when they would have very little contact with people.
Right, there isn't somebody staying there all night.
And then Willis got this awesome thing where he found a list of banks that had older models of the safes from a corrupt insurance official with the Texas Association of Bankers.
Okay.
So, it's like, oh yeah, they have that older bank. You can probably blow up that safe. So the safes, they would have nitroglycerin, and they would force it into the cracks of the square door and setting it off with explosives with dynamite caps.
Oh, okay. So yeah, the same combination, nitroglycerin and dynamite.
But better.
Just not terrible at it.
Exactly. And then the gang liked to rob in the dead of winter in small towns. So what would happen was these two armed men would stand outside the bank, and then they could, in the small farm towns, they could keep off a few of the townspeople at bay while they were still robbing the bank. The money was moved out into waiting cars, like a student. They preferred to
Studebakers
and Cadillacs.
My uncle left it to me. Is he dead? No, just hibernating.
And just before
Disney, don't sue us.
Sorry, we're checking on the dog again. Is she cool? Okay.
She's good.
Okay, so just before the robberies, Willis would climb up a pole outside the telephone office and cut the phone lines. And then they would have a clean getaway once they hit the county line.
That is smart.
Right? I mean, Willis was really smart about this. They did...
Better than Elmer, for sure.
Absolutely. Now, they did do some daytime robberies, mostly night, but one of the daytime robberies, they were in Toronto, Canada, and they were going to rob these messengers that were basically taking money from the Toronto Currency Clearinghouse, and because they had bags of money. And there ended up being exchanged gunfire because the messengers were not going to give up the money.
Ah.
And they basically ended up with the money, but the messengers got hurt. They just didn't die. And so this kind of tarnished their whole, we don't kill anybody.
Right.
They got away with $84,000 in Canadian dollars.
Holy.
Just from that one robbery.
Wow. Okay.
So in other robberies, the patrons and banks always said they were polite and made sure everybody was comfortable. So when they would rob people, they were like,
we're taking from the bank, but we're not going to hurt you.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Don't be scared, ma'am. It's fine. You're fine. Your baby is fine.
Right.
We are just here for what we came for.
Exactly.
Okay.
So Willis, he invested a lot of the money into oil wells because at this point in time, you got what's that show from the TV show where they end up hitting the
Are you thinking of There Will Be...
Hillbillies.
Oh, okay, I haven't seen that. I was thinking of There Will Be Blood.
No, no, I'm thinking of the old TV show from the 1960s. Hillbillies, oh man.
Muddy Buddies, we need you. Call to action.
The song is going through my head and I can't think of it. Anyway, he invested a lot of it, but he kind of lost it. The Newton gang didn't receive much attention from law enforcement until 1924 when the train robbery happened.
Whoa, okay.
So,
now we're to the train robbery.
Exactly. June 12th, 1924, the Newton boys team up with 2 Chicago gangsters, 2 racketeers, and 1 corrupt postal inspector named William J. Fahey. They used inside information to rob the postal train coming from Chicago.
From the postal?
Yep.
That's smart. I mean, if you got to get a guy in your pocket.
Exactly, get that guy.
At that time of,
Right, absolutely.
in history, then, get the postal worker. They know what's going where, when.
Yep. So the train was heading north and west, and it was leaving from Chicago and was carrying large sums of currency from the Federal Reserve. Willis and Jess boarded secretly in Chicago, and then they climbed into the engine and stopped the train at a crossing in Rondout, Illinois.
Do we know how they got on board?
Well, they secretly got onto the train when they started in Chicago.
In my mind, they're dressed up like nuns, like in that that bad 1980s movie with with Richard Pryor.
Oh yes. Oh my God. Yeah, I have to think of that too.
Anyway,
they stole more than $3 million during the robbery. The engineer had to back up the train a little because he didn't stop in the right spot, which caused the robbers to move out of position. And then Doc, one of the brothers, he was shot 5 times with a .45 caliber pistol.
Holy!
By the guy that was was the safe guy, the explosive guy, Black, whatever his name is.
And holy is what he was.
He thought he was a postal worker with a gun. But he lived. Doc lived. Wow. The gang took the money. They loaded Doc into the car as well, and they left the scene.
I guess so.
This is his brother. We probably should take him.
Here's a man who's basically Swiss cheese.
Right. Doc and Joe were arrested first in a Chicago tenement because they were tipped off that a underworld doctor, so one of the gangster doctors, was working on somebody who had gunshots.
Oh, I see.
So they caught them first. Willis was arrested the next day. Glasscock, he ended up with a bulk of the money, but he was eventually arrested as well. They reclaimed almost all the money except $100,000. So out of $3 million, they got all
of it back.
Yeah, they were able to claim it all back, but they couldn't find $100,000. The gang members testified against the corrupt postal worker, Fahey, and the racketeers, because if you look at the timeline, this is during Chicago mobstery.
Right. Okay.
So I think they were more concerned about let's get the mobsters
than let's get the money.
These train robber guys. I mean, we got all the money back.
Most of enough.
It's enough. Let's get these guys on our side. We can go after the big dudes, right? Mm-hmm. So they made an example of Fahey and his mob connections. That's again the corrupt postal worker dude. Mm-hmm. The gang pled guilty. They received light sentences to no one being injured other than their own gang member.
Right.
And that most of the money was returned. Jess Newton buried... Okay, this is so funny. Jess Newton, the one that was not really a robber, he ended up burying some of the money northwest of San Antonio.
So that's where part of it went.
But he couldn't remember where he buried it because he was drunk.
No.
He was drunk when he buried it.
Man.
Jess and Joe had the lightest sentences because they had no prior criminal convictions prior to this big robbery. And they went back to Uvalde, Texas, where they had normal lives. Willis and Doc spent years in Leavenworth, which I assume is a prison. Willis returned to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he ran several gas stations and nightclubs that had criminal connections. So Willis couldn't get he could not get his head out of the whole criminal gang, you know.
Leavenworth Prison is in, I believe, Leavenworth, Kansas, which is exactly where I just talked about. Like the Elmer McCurdy was at Fort Leavenworth in the Army.
Oh my God.
It's known for two things. And
prison?
And the military.
There we go.
We both went there.
See, I have no idea why this happens. In 1934, Willis and Joe, they were sentenced to 10 years for a bank robbery in Oklahoma, but they swear they didn't commit it, and then they were only served 7 years. Joe returned to Uveda, renouncing crime in general. Willis went back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, but in the 1950s, he ended up moving back to Texas as well.
Okay.
And he stayed out of prison. So Doc was arrested in 1968.
Wow.
For a Rowena, Texas, for a bank robbery there. But due to his old age, just dropped the charges.
They were like, so we robbed a bank. He's an old man. Let him go.
Exactly. So Jess Newton... I don't know what his age was.
Every time you say Jess Newton, I can't help but think of Juice Newton.
I know.
I'm going to have that song stuck in my head for days now.
In March 4th, 1960, he ended up passing away. He lived as a cowboy in Uveda, a veteran.
Uvalde?
Yeah. A veteran of the Texas Brigade of World War I. He died in a VA hospital. And he never freaking remembered where he buried that money.
Oh my God.
He was mad about that. Doc was beaten in his last arrest, which he never fully recovered from, but he still lived until he was 83 and he died in 1974. Willis, the gang leader, he died of old age August 22nd, 1979 at the age of 90.
Wow.
Joe Newton... He actually became like a really good. He ended up like owning a lot of small businesses, and people really
so he's
liked
an
him.
entrepreneur.
So he had a cafe and other small businesses. He died in February 3rd, 1989, at the age of 88.
Holy Moses! Well, they certainly they were long
lived.
lived.
Yeah, they live, and then this is the crazy part. I don't want to show you any pictures now, but I'm definitely going to post it on this podcast on Facebook.
In the show notes and stuff, yeah?
One of these brothers had an interview with Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show.
No way!
Yes way!
About their criminal enterprise?
Yes!
Wow! You're right. These stories are sisters but not twins.
Right?
They are
so crazy!
They're so close.
So yeah, I was on totally on Johnny Carson. And it's like what you expect from some older guy from Texas, and Johnny Carson's like, well, tell me what happened, you know? And he's like, well, if you had to do this again, would you? And he's like, no, I wouldn't do this again. It was a terrible idea, you know?
And it was Jess that buried the money but couldn't remember it?
Exactly.
Okay, well, like, for real, like, he resonates with me so much. I have very, very often, like, if I've had, the last of a little bag of candy and I know that, like, my boyfriend is going to steal it, I have frequently, like, squirreled away a snack.
Exactly.
And then, like, only come across it much, much later.
Right.
And my very first day of, I think, all right, well, we're going a little bit off topic here. But my very first day of work, I work for a hotel in downtown St. Louis. It wasn't clear where I was to park, so I just worried about being late. Parked in the first, place where I could pull in and pay and park. There were signs out in front of the parking garage. I took pictures of them. At the end of my workday, I went back and the signs were not there and I was not sure. So I walked around for half an hour and finally just found a friendly parking lot attendant that, thank goodness, worked for the like series of parking lots in downtown. And I know who I am, so I had taken a picture of the outside of the parking garage. But just didn't get the cross streets or drop a pin or anything. But I'm like, I think my car is here. And I was seriously about to just give up.
I don't have a car anymore.
I was about to go full Jess Newton, and he's like, oh no, honey, you're just like one block that way. You see that building with the marker here? You're right there. And sure enough, I was a block away. I was a block away. I made it home. ...
Oh my God.
So successful.
Our stories kind of crossed weirdly.
They really did. Although these guys were, again,
They were
much
a little
better.
bit better at robbing things.
At robbing
like
things.
banks and trains.
Still maybe not the best end, but like...
Yeah.
But they lived long lives.
Yeah, they did. They very much did. Very much did.
Who knows how long you get away with, the benefits of a life of crime in between here and there. Like, yeah. I'm not saying go rob a bank. Don't rob banks.
Don't rob banks.
Stay in school, kids.
Stay in school. So I think this is where we're going to take a break, right?
This is where we take a pause for for a moment, and then we will be back with What's Nice.
We'll be back with What's Nice.
If you enjoy getting muddy with us, here are some ways that you can help support the podcast. First of all, you can like and subscribe to us on the platform where you're listening. And of course, a good review will help us find new listeners. If you're listening on YouTube, please leave a comment in the comments section. You could also join our Facebook group where we can discuss the episodes and hear your episode suggestions. And then, of course, finally, if you really like Big Muddy Mayhem, tell your friends so they can join us too. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
And now it's time for What's Nice here.
Yay.
And Janet, this week I took my What's Nice from Leavenworth, Kansas, where Elmer was trained, however poorly, in using explosives while he was there in the military. But what they do have is the C.W. Parker Carousel Museum.
Oh, a carousel museum.
There is, yeah. It's. I'm going to show you a picture of their grandest carousel.
Oh, that's so pretty.
C.W. Parker was born in 1864 in Abilene, Kansas, and in the heart of the Wild West. Mm-hmm. So, like Elmer, he's kind of from that time. Like Elmer, he ends up working in amusements, but before he dies. So he builds the first attraction called the Carry-Us-All, which is kind of a play on carousel.
Yeah.
In 1898. And he gets famous for the carvings, the horses that he makes. And so he ends up moving to Leavenworth, Kansas. The big attraction is this one that I've shown you, which is the 1913 carousel.
So pretty.
It is the grandest, but it isn't necessarily the oldest there. There are many other carousels there in various stages of operation.
Wow.
And you can also see a bunch of the carved horses that Parker was famous for.
Okay.
So I have got one to show you here that is one of the older ones. One thing that I thought was particularly charming is being in Kansas, Parker, every horse that he carved can be ID'd by a cob of corn at the tail of the saddle.
Oh, wow.
Do you see how there's like a little ear of corn? And it's on, I guess, all of them that he does. And so some of them are in the museum. There are some that are up for private sale. They go for like $2,000 to $7,000 a piece. So please subscribe to our Patreon. So Janet and I can record atop of corncob ponies.
Exactly.
As we were meant to do. But
that's so cool.
But that's what's nice in Leavenworth, Kansas.
Nice. I definitely want to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
we'll put it on the list.
Now we have a list. We're going to be creating a list, apparently. So my what's nice is pretty short, which is fine considering our stories were a lot. In Rondout, Illinois, I am going to talk about the North Shore Bike Path.
Okay.
So I used to ride my bicycle a lot. And the past couple of years, I have not been able to ride it as much, but I'm still super attracted to, fun trails, and it's always fun to go. So it's a part of the trail link in Illinois. It's only about 8 miles long. The endpoints are, they're in Scranton Avenue in Lake Bluff, and then Bryce Avenue in, can't pronounce the name, Mondalclin, whatever, it's fine. So it's about 8 miles, it's asphalt, and it runs parallel to State Route 176.
Okay.
And it goes right through Roundabout.
Oh, nice.
So it's just this nice trail. I've read a lot of, compliments of it. It's like, it's so pretty. You can see some ponds and stuff. And, it's like not right next to the highway. But
you see things hiking and biking that you don't see from a car.
Absolutely.
It's a completely different experience.
Absolutely. There's not a lot in that town. But, bike trail. I'm totally down for a bike trail. You know what I mean? The dog
Blue, you can't ride a bike.
Blue thinks she can ride a bike. What do you think of the podcast?
She thinks she can ride a bike. She thinks she can rob a bank. We're a bad influence on this dog.
The dog thinks she's people.
But,
so, yeah, that's pretty much my what's nice. It's really, really short because there's really nothing happening in that town. So.
Fantastic.
But I think we had some really awesome stories tonight.
We had some fun stuff tonight.
God.
Again, it is so funny how even though we keep everything so secret.
We do! We really, really do! I swear we do.
From one another. Either Janet is spying on me or else.
So I don't know what's going to happen, folks. I mean, eventually down the line, you know what's going to happen.
Eventually we may have the same story.
And we're going to bust out laughing, and it's going to be awesome, and I can't wait to share the certain things that I might know that she might not know. It's going to be great.
We'll see. We'll get there when we get there. But in the meantime, we thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for listening. I mean, again, follow us on Facebook. Make sure you listen to our podcast, even in the background. Give us good comments because we really appreciate it.
Comments I love that because then it's like, okay, maybe, I hear every once in a while from someone who's like, oh, well, I've been listening to the story and I think this, that, and the other. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you were listening.
Right.
It's such a treat.
Just recently you had a friend of yours
Brian,
do something, right?
Our friends Brian and Stephanie. Shout out to Brian and Stephanie.
Hi, Brian and Stephanie.
Went to the Arabia Steamboat Museum while they were in Kansas City.
Because we talked about
because
it.
They heard about it on the podcast and that's really what we're here to do.
Right. I mean, Tracey and I are very much into local history stuff, and if there's a thing to go see, you definitely need to go see it. It's so amazing. So I think this is where we end our podcast.
It's true. No roadside attraction too small.
Exactly.
And as we end our podcast, I think that as we say every week,
stay Midwest nice.
Stay Midwest nice.